Hello students, in the last class we had seen introduction to HTML. HTML is the one which helps us to create web pages and it stands for Hypertext Markup Language. It was first started by Tim Berners-Lee, and then we had seen that it was taken by World Wide Web Consortium W3C. W3C is nothing but a community and which took forward HTML and they made use of HTML to create web pages. So we had seen what is HTML and where it come from, and we had seen this example, and we had also seen what is meant by markup. And now the next topic is background. So what is the W3C? W3C created in 1994. The World Wide Web Consortium is the main standard organization for the World Wide Web. That means World Wide Web Consortium W3C, it is a set of people, and these set of people create standards, and these standards has to be followed by all the manufacturers who work on web. That means if you're creating a website or if you're creating a web page, your web page should follow the standards that has been created by this W3C. That means if you're creating a web page or if you're creating a website, that website has to run in any system irrespective of the operating system it is working on. Whether it is using any hardware or whether it is using any other operating system, your web page should be able to run on any system. So if it has to run on any system, there has to be some set of rules and regulations. So that set of rules and regulations or syntax is being created by the World Wide Web. Okay. So second point is, to promote compatibility, the W3C produces recommendations, also called specification. That means they have some set of recommendations. Recommendation means some set of rules, some set of regulations, so that your web pages or your websites are compatible enough to run on any systems irrespective of its operating systems or its hardware, whether you're using Google Chrome or whether you're using Mozilla Firefox or you're using Internet Explorer. Your web pages should run on any browser or any operating system. Okay. So these recommendations are very lengthy documents that are meant to guide manufacturers in their implementation of HTML, XML, and other web protocols. That means you have to follow these recommendations whenever you are implementing any HTML, XML, and other web protocols. Okay. The membership of the W3C at present consists of almost 400 members. These include businesses, government agencies, universities, and individuals. That means W3C is nothing but a community, and how many people are there? 400 people are there, and that also of different sectors. These all people have sat together and they have formed these recommendations. So whenever you are creating an HTML code or when you're creating a web page or you're working on a web protocol, see that you follow these recommendations that has been created by the W3C. So they have just created a set of syntax and we have to follow those syntax. If we are following those syntax and we have created a website, that website will run on any system. The next topic is XHTML. It is one more web programming language, XHTML. We'll be not going through detail in it. It is just one part of. It is just one of the markup language. Okay. So let us see what is the first point. Instead of growing HTML, the W3C turned its attention to a new specification called XHTML 1.0, which was a version of HTML that used stricter XML extensible markup language syntax. That means when HTML was growing up, instead of focusing on HTML, W3C they turned their attention to one more markup language, and that markup language was called as XHTML 1.0. This XHTML 1.0 made use of the syntax of another markup language called as XML. So it is a combination of XML and HTML. XML and HTML both together one more specification that is called as XHTML 1.0. What this XHTML 1.0 was this? It was somewhat same as HTML and XML, but it made use of strict syntax rules. That means if you all are not following the proper syntax rules, then your web page will not run properly. That means it will show some errors. So XHTML 1.0 was a stricter version than HTML and XML. Okay. Second point, the goal of XHTML with its strict rules was to make page rendering more predictable by forcing web authors to create web pages without syntax errors. Okay, that means they were not lenient. This markup language was not lenient, and web authors had to be very strict enough whenever they were writing their HTML code. That means they had to write their code with proper syntax rule. That means they had to not miss a comma, they had to not miss a bracket or something like that. If they are missing a bracket, then it used to show syntax error. That much strict was XHTML. Okay. Third point, the XML based syntax rule for XHTML are pretty easy to follow. So the main rules are lowercase tag names, attributes always within quotes, and all elements must have a closing element. Okay, so these XHTML, if they were having very strict syntax rules also, those rules were very easy to follow. And what was their simple rules? Lower tag names. Tag names are nothing but, I have told you all previously, they are nothing but HTML elements. HTML elements will be telling us how to have an heading, or how to have a title, or how to insert an image. So if you are making use of those HTML elements, or when you're making use of those HTML tag names, they are saying that it has to be written in lowercase. Okay. In presently in HTML, if those tag names are written in uppercase or lowercase, both means the same. That means they are not case sensitive. Here what it is, XHTML is case sensitive. That means if you have to make use of lowercase tag names. Second rule was what of theirs? Attributes always within quotes. Next, in the later classes, we'll be knowing about attributes. Attributes are the one which will be used with tag names, and they are telling that if attributes should always be within quotes. If you are not using quotes, then your web page will again show an error. Okay, so the second rule was you have to make use of attributes within quotes. And HTML elements usually have a closing and opening and a closing element. Okay, so all elements must have a closing element. If you are not putting a closing element, then again it will show you an error. So these were very simple rules that we had to follow for XHTML. That means only that much strict they were. HTML is not as strict as XHTML. That means if you do any error, or if you do any mistakes in HTML, it is okay. Okay, so hope we understood what is meant by XHTML. XHTML is a combination of HTML markup language and XML markup language, but only with a stricter syntax rules. And those syntax rules also are very simple to follow. We have seen it now. Okay, so next, continuation of XHTML. To help web authors, two versions of XHTML were created. And what are they? XHTML 1.0 strict and XHTML 1.0 transitional. That means to help web authors, two versions of XHTML were created: XHTML strict and XHTML transitional. So what is the difference between these two versions? Let us see. First thing, the strict version was meant to be rendered by a browser using the strict syntax rules and tag support described by the W3C XHTML 1.0 strict specification. That means if you all are creating a web page using this version of XHTML, which version? XHTML 1.0 strict. If you all are creating web page using this version, you all have to follow all the syntax rule that was specified by W3C. It has to be strict. If you all are not following those syntax rules, then your web pages will create an error. Now, what is this XHTML 1.0 transitional? The transitional recommendation is a more forgiving flavor of XHTML and was meant to act as a temporary transition to the eventual global adoption of XHTML strict. That means this version of XHTML, that is 1.0 transitional, you need not strictly follow the syntax rules. That means it is good that if you follow the syntax rule. By mistake, if you all have not followed the syntax rule, it was lenient enough. That means it used to not show any error. So this was more forgiving flavor of HTML. That means this version is very strict. This version is not very strict. So to help web authors, these two versions came into picture. That means if you are not focusing much on syntax rule, you all will be focusing on more coding. But in strict version, you have to focus on coding as well as syntax. And in the second version, you have to follow the syntax also. You have to follow the your second version. No need of following the syntax rules. Okay, so two versions of XHTML. Now the next topic is validators. How to ensure your pages follow a standard. That means if you have created a web page, how to make sure which standard you all are following, whether you are following 1.0 strict or whether you are following 1.0 transitional. So, a key part of the standard movement in the web development community of the 2000 was the use of HTML validators as a means of verifying that a web page markup followed the rules for XHTML transitional or strict. So what had happened is they created one website known as validators. So these validators, we have to dump our web page to these validators. These validators used to tell us whether we are following the first version or whether we are following the second version. For example, this is how validators look. Here you can see that validator.w3.org. So this web page, what it used to do is whenever you create a website or whenever you have created a web page, that website or that web page address you have to put here. Okay, once you put your address here, you have to press this button check. So once you press the button check, the validator will check whether your website is following XHTML strict version or XHTML transition version. Okay, so these validators will help us to find out whether we are using HTML 1.0 strict or whether we are using XHTML 1.0 transitional. So validators are only used to find out that. Okay, next. Next topic is XHTML 2.0 and what WG. This we will be seeing it in the next class. Thank you.